Hello, and welcome to What We've Learned, another episode from Series 3. And as ever, it's myself, Steve Kemish, and Shane Redding. But we're not alone. In fact, we're joined by somebody today, Shane, who's going to talk to us in a roundabout fashion about squiggly careers, whatever that means.
It's such a lovely term, isn't it? Squiggly career. I adore it. Yes, Emma Garrett, I think, is the perfect embodiment of the term, which is that, where you end up in your career is not necessarily where you planned or where you thought you might end up, but he is just been appointed as development director at Eastbourne College. And it's a fascinating role, and she's going to tell us a little bit more about it. But she's also had a huge experience around the world, but also locally here in Bedford as Deputy Lieutenant Bedfordshire, and also running businesses, founding businesses, and masses of charity work. So we're in for a bit of a treat about learning through a interesting and varied experiences, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, founding family as well. Anyone that's listening in that's had to juggle the work-life balance, then you can learn an awful lot from Emma as well in terms of how you do that. A really inspiring session, this one, from somebody who wears many, many hats. And I'm sure even if, like me, you'd never heard the term squiggly career, can very much relate to Emma's journey and how one part of her world can lead on to other things, close to home, or indeed, as we find out, all over the world. So let's hear from Emma Garrett.
Well, welcome, Emma. Really pleased to have you on today's podcast.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
So I thought we'd start and sort of kick off really reflecting back, really, and I won't ask how long ago, but when you left university, did you leave with a sort of burning desire, vocational plan? You had a career all mapped out, or not?
I always wanted to work in television. So it wasn't necessarily that I thought of it as a long-term career, but it's an area that I wanted to get into. I studied English and theatre at uni and did lots of acting and enjoyed that. And I'd always thought that TV was something I'd like to get into. And so basically that's what I did, but it wasn't an easy thing to do. There was lots of knocking on doors. I didn't go straight into it. I was temping, and I did that thing which is probably one of the first lessons I learned, which was persevering and just being tenacious and just sort of finding a way. If no was the answer, asking a different question, that sort of thing. So I basically made friends with a receptionist at an independent TV company. I wasn't completely callous about it. She was a very lovely lady, but we sort of, because I kept phoning her up trying to speak to the MD and he was never there or never available, or I would pop by and drop in to see if he was there, and he never was. And eventually I phoned her one day and she said, well, he is busy at the moment. I'm leaving the office at 5. I think he'll probably be here much longer than that, which I took as an invitation. And sure enough, I turned up at 5:15 and managed to sit in front of him, and then got offered my first job in TV. So that's how it all started, really.
It's interesting, isn't it, Emma? Just what you described, those skills, that if you took the industry out of what you've talked about, that would be a very, very transferable piece of knowledge for anyone, is that perseverance, that tenacity, and also that lateral thinking of, right, okay, if the normal route through the door is closed, which are the other ways around, which I'm sure has served you well in as your career's moved on, is that ability to find different ways to solve the problem.
Absolutely, it has. And I think the other thing is just connecting. It's crucial to connect with people. And if you do manage to make a connection, well, then just keep on at it. I mean, funnily enough, my daughter's just experienced exactly the same thing. She's a graduate. She's been in London trying to find work, applying for hundreds and hundreds of roles. And the one that she's now got was the one that didn't happen first time, but she was emailed by the company and she made a connection with that person. And that's basically how she then got in the door, got the interview, and once she sort of sat face to face, albeit virtually, she was offered the position. So in fact, they've created a position for her. So you just have to become more than a name, I think.
That's really interesting. You know, that I know you as a consummate networker, and I think people who are, it's often seen as, oh well, it's easy, it's something that you do naturally, but actually it is a skill, and it's a skill that can be learned. But why do you think you had that innate realization very early on? You know, let's be honest about this, I can say it was before the days of LinkedIn, that this was something that was important to do. Was it a learned skill through the family? Was it school? Where did you learn that from?
Yeah, it was definitely a learned skill through the family. I mean, my grandmother, my father's mother, was a larger than life character, and you know, she would never have called herself a networker, but that was exactly what she was. I mean, she used to go on these coach trips around the place, and she'd sit on the coach, and by the end of it, you know, she'd have 5 new best friends, and they'd all be planning their next trip together. And my parents, similarly, you know, my dad taught at a school for 25 years. In fact, interestingly, the school that I'm now going back to work at, but he taught there for 25 years, built up a massive community. I was there at the school, and there were, you know, links being made with people all the time, and there were people in and out of the house all the time. And I'm just fortunate that I had that sort of social side to my upbringing that then became normal and natural, and just it may be learned, but not kind of deliberately learned. It's more by a sort of osmosis, if you like.
Well, it also relies on being genuine as well. As you said, you weren't just callously trying to befriend the receptionist. It was actually trying to do it, yes, of course, a bit for your gain, but do it on a human level rather than just see them as a piece that opens up another part of the board. So you know, it takes that emotional intelligence as well, Emma, that must have been there, perhaps, you know, taught or just nurtured as you've gone through your life. Yeah,
I think so. You know, I would definitely describe myself as a people person. I think it got to the point, Shane will probably agree with this because she knows me from Bedford and my sort of work in the town, but people would see me coming and cross over the road so that they didn't get emmered and invited to take part in some charity or, you know, my latest initiative. So I definitely, it's kind of something it's almost an addiction, if you like, making connections and putting people together and trying to find out, you know, their skills and how they would work in terms of whatever I might be doing. And I love all that. I love how that all comes together.
I think I share that love, and I think people who know me well, you know, it's very rewarding because actually it's often not about you at all. It's about the other person, and you just really, you know, I personally love being emmered. It's a great thing to be targeted because it's actually opening opportunities that I might not be aware of or even know. And I think when I've realised that actually a lot of people find it very difficult and it's not something that they would initiate, but when somebody else does it for them, hugely appreciative. So I think it, you know, it's very much about that giving and then getting back, which I think for me, you know, I've seen where it's taken you. And one of the reasons for having you talk to us today on this, you know, series about leadership and pioneering is I really feel you've demonstrated a squiggly career, Emma, brilliantly. So where did you go next? You know, you did your researching in TV. I think you even got to work with Ant and Dec, which is interesting in itself. What happened next?
Yeah, they were very little then. It was on Bite a Grove. I worked for an independent TV production company, and that was one of the programs that we made. And I started as a researcher. Well, no, actually, I started as production secretary, and then I became a researcher, and then I actually presented a show on Tyne Tees, which then was picked to go, you know, to go on the network. But at that point, I was married, and my husband got a posting. He was in the army, got a posting to Australia. So all my hopes of being on the big screen were dashed, and we moved to Australia. It wasn't such a hardship, I have to say. I love Australia, and I'd spent time there before, so I was delighted to be going back. But in terms of my squiggly career, well, my husband was doing a job that was running training courses in the jungle. So he sort of had 3 weeks prep, 3 weeks in the jungle, and then 3 weeks off. And in those 3 weeks, we were determined to do as much exploring around Australia as we could. And so I, again, decided that I would temp. I got a job at Griffith University on the Gold Coast in the physiotherapy department. So not my area of expertise in the slightest, being sort of always arts focused. But I had the skills that they needed. We got on extremely well, and they basically said, well, you know, we want you here, but when you go off every 6 weeks for 3 weeks, that's fine. Just come back to us when you're done. So that's what happened. So I worked there for the whole of our time in Australia, loving the travel, enjoying the job. It was a very vibrant community, made lots of friends in the university, and then had our first child. So then I stopped working to have her, and then we came back to the UK, and then basically proceeded to have a child every 2 years till we had our fifth. But by then we'd moved out to the Middle East, so I had number 5 out there, and I did sort of work out there, although it was unpaid. A group of us set up an organisation running arts events for local charities, raising money for local charities, with visiting lecturers and speakers and musicians. And although we started that with my dad doing an evening soiree on sex in Shakespeare, which did get a few eyebrows raised and get quite a big audience, we then, by the end of it, we were being approached by the Italian embassy and asked if we would put on a concert for them for a visiting Italian pianist. And between us, we were all volunteers. We were just doing something, you know, for our enjoyment and to benefit local charities. And we did everything. We did the press releases, we did the poster design, we did the tickets, we did all the hospitality and everything. And so that was just, again, using skills that we all had, and pulling something together that was thoroughly enjoyable. And I guess that was the first of my sort of charity fundraising activities, really.
Well, the subject, the word raising is an interesting one, Emma, because most people listening in go, right, she's had 5 kids. We could probably stop the podcast at that point. She's, you know, there's no time to do anything else. But so you've raised 5 children, a wife, traveling around the world, and finding time to use those kind of skills to network and to do good. And I wonder, particularly with the Bahrain bit, but maybe with Australia as well. I mean, we started talking about how, you know, just to get to know people, to network, as we've talked about. But did you find significant differences in different parts of the world on how you had to navigate that, or was there a big crossover of actually people are people? It's the same sort of buttons to press to connect people, to find people.
Yeah, I mean, I think kids are a great connector, because whether you're in the soft play or the, you know, swimming pool or the school playground, whatever, and you see somebody else, you know, either looking lonely or you know, with a kid who wants to come and play or whatever it is, that's that initial connection, and then everything can build from there. I think when we moved back to the UK, again, that was my initial contact with people in Bedford, because I didn't know anybody here, and really didn't want to leave Bahrain, and so it was going to be tough whatever happened. But actually what made it for me was the amazing people that I just met in the playground, and they're still great friends, you know, 13 years later, and our kids, whether they've grown up together or not, you know, they're still the initial connecting point. And I think if you move somewhere without kids, perhaps it's much harder to actually make those initial friendships.
I think it's really interesting, because I think I do some mentoring, and it's a chat that I have with people who are taking, you know, maybe what they see as a career break, male or female, to have children, or, you know, in terms of making those life choices, and often very worried that they see that they'll lose skills, or that you know, that there's nothing going on that will make them employable when they return to work, for those who take a complete break. But you're saying complete opposite, that actually you continued to build up useful skills, meet interesting people. And I know, you know, you'd started to do even more charity work at that time. So is that something you think because you didn't see an issue, Emma, that it was just what you were doing anyway, rather than perhaps if you'd been in corporate life and it was suddenly, a stop, if you like, and change?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's the employers that have got the problem, because the skills that you have to develop as a parent, for goodness sake, are incredible. And whether that's all the multitasking you have to do, whether that's the sort of mentoring that you have to do for your kids, whether that's the problem solving that you have to do, whether that's the time management, I mean, all those skills are absolutely crucial in any career or any work environment. And if the employers can't see the benefit of those, and if they write somebody off because they've not been in the office for some years, well, I think that's definitely their loss. I think I definitely learned enormous skills and confidence and understanding through being a parent, which I continue, every level that they're at, every age that they're at, you learn new things, and you have to develop new ways of communicating with your kids and new strategies to help them through their problems and difficulties and failures, as well as their successes. And all of those things are transferable skills. Absolutely.
It's interesting. It links, actually. We interviewed Rachel Tranter on episode 2 of this series, who started Women on Boards in the UK, and similar conversation. Emma, the word confidence was going through my head when you were just talking then around, how much of it are you aware? And Rachel was making the point that a lot more women, and maybe men as well, but focusing on that, were more capable of offering at higher levels than perhaps they were aware of. And it's that self-awareness and self-confidence that I have learned skills and they are transferable, but being consciously aware of it to try and join the dots so that you can go back into, perhaps after bringing up a family, or if you want to make a change in career, as the squiggly, extremely squiggly line, if we started to talk about shows, is that you've transferred, how you've got from nearly being Ant and Dec and Emma up in Tyne Tees to PJ and Duncanland, through Australia, Bahrain, and then back into Bedford is quite extraordinary. So we're back in Bedford, Emma. What's next? Once you've you landed with the kids, got that settled, what was the next challenge you gave yourself?
So once again, I started off, once my youngest was in nursery, I started off thinking about what I was going to do, and a job came up at my elder daughter's school, which was a temporary thing. And again, temping, I don't know quite whether that's still a thing these days, but for me, I'd got my typing, I did my intensive typing course one summer, and it was one of the best things I did, because I could touch type, and it got me into so many different roles over the years. And so I got a job at this school covering reception, and again, that was a great way to meet more people. And through that, I met the wife of the music teacher, who was a marketer, and she said, after a lengthy conversation, why don't you come and work for us? I think you've got some great skills. And so that's what I did. So I left the school, I went to work for the product marketing company, and started off working on different accounts. And it was very sort of early on in the whole social media revolution, and they asked me if I'd look at social media, because they weren't really doing it at that point. So that's what I did. So I did some training and found out more about the whole social media world, and so that's what I did for them. And then in Bedford, there's a park called Russell Park, and in the middle of the park there was a kiosk building, basically toilets, and it was on the edge of a putting green, and they rented out putters to visitors to the park. And when I lived very near that park, and one of the first things I did when I moved to Bedford was go to the park with the kids. I saw the kiosk and I thought, great, coffee. Went over, asked for a cup of coffee, and the girl behind the counter looked at me like I had 3 heads and said, "Oh no, it's just putters. There's no drinks." And having frequented many a park in my time with the kids, I'm always on the lookout for the coffee, and there was none available. So that was when my mind started thinking, well, surely I could do something here. I could turn this into some kind of coffee shop. And so that was the next thing that I did. So I approached the council and I said, you're missing a trick here. can I present my ideas to you, which I did, and then it bizarrely then went out to tender, so they were inviting other people to pitch for my idea. But luckily, I think my chocolate brownies that I took in for my presentation did the trick.
But I hope that doesn't count as a local council bribe.
Well, no. I'm sure it was all fair and above board.
It was a sweetener.
Yes. And so I then took that on. So I left the product marketing company and just set up my own social media business, and did that as well as running the kiosk in Russell Park.
And still the children. So this is really interesting to me, because it goes back to where you started and sort of saying, wanting an opportunity and making it happen. And I think sometimes just seeing an opportunity. But it's really fascinating to me that you didn't just see and do the kiosk, but at the same time, as you said, you had your social media consulting, and you were also starting to do some quite heavy lifting in charity work in Bedford, and we'll come on and talk about Superfest. But how did in terms of juggling time, but how did one feed off the other, Emma?
Well, the kiosk was great in terms of, because I had the social media experience, I could do a lot of online work to build up the profile. So it flew pretty quickly, and also because it was a gap in the market, it was something that was needed. And so many people said to me over the years, oh, I've always thought about doing this, and what a great idea, I always thought I'd do this. But I guess I had the bloody mindedness to just get on and do it and have a go.
Well, probably the insatiable need for caffeine with 5 kids.
Well, yes, exactly.
Well.
That's what it all came down to ultimately. Yeah.
But I think it's fascinating to me that that social media and some of the things that people say, oh yes, running a cafe in a park, but it was far more than that, because it became very quickly a community hub, and in fact it then led to another business, didn't it? But it was the things that you did because you understood your customers through the social media, and understood them not just through that, but because you were talking to them. So it wasn't just a coffee, but you did things like story time and other stuff as well, didn't you, Emma?
Yeah, I think it's what I say to my kids all the time, is that everything you do in your life leads to the next thing. It's definitely a journey. It's like Lego building bricks, every little brick you add to the tower, and that makes who you are. And so I had kids, so I knew that mums need something to do with their little ones, on a damp, dull Monday morning, just to get out the house. And we did charity fun runs. We did a Where's Wally charity fun run. We used to do arts and crafts activities. We did some stuff with Sustrans, the bike charity. And one of my favorite things was the Christmas Eve carols. So we decided we'd just do carols on Christmas Eve with mulled wine and mince pies. And I remember the very first time we did it, I was in business with a partner initially. And she and I were standing in the kiosk, and it was about 3:30. I think it started at 4, and there was nobody there. And we had gallons of mulled wine on the go. We had the keyboard player poised and ready, and there was just nobody. And we were just like, oh my God, we've really, really kind of made a bad mistake here. We haven't thought this through properly. Maybe it's clashing with some other services or something. Anyway, sure enough, about 10 minutes later, from every corner of the park, the horde started coming in their red and white Father Christmas hats. And we had about 300 people at that first one, I think. And it was amazing, because you had grandparents, you had babies, you had young children, everyone was joining in. We had bells and tambourines, and very informal, but the only thing we didn't have was Jesus and the donkey, really. I mean, it was fantastic, and continued to grow and grow until I think the last time we did it, there were probably about 500 people there.
Wow, there's the community bit, isn't it? Because I was going to ask you, you started the social media agency, but we're also dropped in to kind of understand it. But for me, so when you started it, social media wasn't even probably a term, Emma. It was about social networking platforms, and what you've got there is, again, marry your understanding of technology digitally with the consummate ability to bring people together is why you got 300 people in the park. So forget whether it is a social media platform or a social networking platform, you literally had social networking going on with mulled wine to boot.
Yeah, but you know, it's kind of, I always said I was an accidental businesswoman. It's kind of just the way things happened. It was never this mapped out kind of ambitious career where I had to tick things off along the way. And I guess that's what we're talking about, this whole squiggly thing. It was just the way things evolved and the way things happened. And then you see something that works and you then continue to do that because it works. And I loved it. I mean, I'm so fortunate really that every single job that I've done, I've loved. And I don't know, I was thinking about that this morning actually. I don't know if that's because of the job or because of me, because some of the jobs, I was going back to when I traveled before I got married and was in Australia. I remembered I sold water in shopping centres, those massive kind of water coolers and water canisters. And I mean, that's not the greatest job in the world, but I loved it. I had such fun. And it taught me a great respect as well. For whenever I'm stopped in, you know, shopping centres by those poor people trying to sell something, even if I'm not going to buy it, I always will stop and talk to them because I've been there and I know what it's like and how soul destroying it can be. But you just try and make the most of it. And that's, you need them, you know, you need the income at that time. That's what you're doing to feed yourself and pay your rent.
I think that's interesting because that's something another one of our guests touched on, is actually at the time when you do it. And this was Ian Lovett. He said, you know, he wasn't thinking about founding a business to sell. He was basically creating something which would earn him some money, as you say, to pay the mortgage. And I think there's often perhaps a misconception, I think particularly, and I'm going to be very ageist here, but for those who've grown up watching Dragon's Den or, other similar business programs, is that, you know, you start at the age of, 18 with an idea and go and found a business, where actually the reality, I think, is the ones that are successful like you, much more about seeing that opportunity, making it happen for other reasons. But you did go on and expand the hospitality empire, didn't you? Because in fact, Pavilion in the Park was the next step. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, again, it was it was almost like the kiosk was a dress rehearsal for the Pavilion, because the Pavilion was a far bigger building, again, an empty building in the middle of a stunning park, but the sort of reputation of the park had gone downhill. People weren't really using it. Some people I spoke to when I was doing my kind of market research didn't even know it was there or had never been in it, and they lived in the middle of Bedford. So there was this stunning Victorian Pavilion building, which was basically used to store park benches and lawnmowers and things. And I'd walk past it and I'd just sort of dream of opening that as a community hub. And that's what happened. It went out to tender. I mean, it had been out to tender a few times. I think the council hadn't really been happy with the people that had applied to run it, or with their ideas. And so the kiosk for me was the perfect way to show that I could do it, because I'd already done it in a park, okay, albeit on a smaller scale, but I'd built up my fan base, my audience, my customers, who I could easily then transfer to the other park without missing out, because they're, as Shane knows, they're two very different entities. One is literally just takeaway, which is great for dog walkers and people going to the playground with their kids. And the other, I was really keen to sort of focus on the food, and especially after my experiences in Australia, I guess, where I just loved all those kind of park cafes and beach cafes and that informal kind of setting in a really nice environment. And and so that's when we opened up there. And again, you know, I just love the whole thing, and the communicating with your customers, and I think you kind of become this is good and bad, but you kind of become synonymous with the place, and people would come and if I wasn't there, although I was there pretty much all the time, if I wasn't there, they'd be, oh, you know, I came to the Pavilion but you weren't there. And the challenge is to make that okay, to make it okay for people to come, and even if you're not there, they still feel as looked after, and get the sort of experience that you would want them to get if you were there.
That's an interesting parallel, isn't it, for small businesses, that you can't, if you're the owner, founder of the business, you've got to be able to devolve responsibility, but also to that point, experience as well. Unless, Emma, you're about to tell us in your squiggly line you developed a cloning machine, and we're talking to Emma 4 at the moment. The other 3 are out doing things. You can only be so so far, right?
That would be nice. But it's about devolving responsibility, but it's also about making those people that work for you want to be responsible, and you know, it's about being a leader, but in a way that you don't get any of the credit, that they get the credit because they're learning to do it as well, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely does. I think it's also I would say again, it's where cultures and values come through as well. You know, you'll employ the right kind of people and empower them as well, that they are confident enough to be Emma, or to do things the way Emma would do them, without feeling like they need to come back to check every time. It's a very tricky balance, isn't it? If we get the right people that are armed ready with the right kind of skills, particularly in that hospitality environment, that customer facing place. They're armed with the skills, but equally armed with the confidence that, yeah, I'm going to do it the right way. I don't need to go back to be checked every time.
One of my employees came up with a hashtag, which was WWEGD, which was what would Emma Garrett do? And she always said she always used to think about that. If there was a situation that she didn't quite know what to do, she would just think back, right, what would Emma do? What would she do? And then that was her benchmark, if you like. And she said that really helped her.
And interesting, because actually it might not have been what you would have done, but gave her the confidence to make a decision, which is really interesting. Because one of the things I really love, and yes, I'm lucky enough to have been to many very happy events, both at the kiosk but also at the pavilion, is that it was about, to me, always about the whole experience. You know, yes, amazing food, like the brunches were just the best, but it was things like also, you know, doing the pop-up theatre. So was this people coming to you and sort of thinking, oh, this is a place where we might be able to do it, or serendipity, if you like, or sort of you had that culture? Or was it you more reaching out thinking that would be different, that would be nice?
Yeah, it was me reaching out, but it was also me doing what I wanted to do. You know, it was a great place to be in the middle of a park, because you basically could do whatever you liked. And I, as a child, had seen, for example, with the theatre, I'd seen that theatre company perform and always loved it as a child, and just thought, well, Bedford Park's perfect to bring them over. And that's what we did. So the chap that was part of this company, I'd seen, you know, as a sort of 10-year-old, he was still running the theatre company, and and I just loved being able to do that. So, you know, it was always something that I personally would have wanted to attend, and that was sort of my touch point, if you like. You know, is it something that I would want to go to? And if it was, well, then I'd sort of work around it and put it on.
Right, so let's just recap then, Emma. On the squiggly line, we've done TV, we've done international travel and charitable work. We've conquered the parks and kiosks and pavilions. And by the way, I've been to both as well. I'm not that far away. My mum lives by Bedford Park, and when the world returns, it will be one of the first places I'm sure I will be pressured to go, is to get Eggs Benedict in the pavilion, or outside the pavilion probably. What's next? What else? Surely you've just given up by then. You've had a rest and gone, I've done it all. I'm kind of, you know, I've conquered the world, I'll stop, or not? What comes next, Emma?
Well, what comes next? It's you never know what path your life is going to take, do you? And my husband was very ill with cancer for 9 years, and this was while I was running the pavilion and the kiosk, and probably it was partly a distraction for me to keep busy and to keep working. And he lost his fight in December 2018. So that's a bit of a kind of point in your life at which you have to stop, however busy you need to be, and take stock. And in fact, I did a walk for Macmillan from Brighton to Eastbourne, a 26-mile walk, in June of 2019, so the June after he died. And there was a group of 9 of us, most of whom were actually friends from school. My daughter did it as well. She was 13 at that point, 14. And And one of the friends, as we sort of started on this literally marathon hike, said to me, I hadn't seen her for a while, and she said, so, you know, how are you? What are your plans? What are you thinking you'll do? And I sort of said, well, I actually haven't thought about it at all. I don't know. I'm just living day to day and trying to survive and trying to make sure the kids are all doing okay. And that was that. And then we did this hike. Now, I grew up in Eastbourne. My father taught there for 25 years, as I said. And my husband and I had always said we would return to Eastbourne once the kids had finished school. And while I was walking on the downs and these incredible views, and I mean, it was very, very windy, but beautifully bright day, and it was just a bit of an epiphany. And I decided pretty much there and then that it was time to head back to Eastbourne. It was time to head home. It was time to be near my sister, near my father-in-law, and other family. And so that was the beginning of the plan, which is now rather miraculously taking place. So my youngest daughter is doing her GCSEs now in Bedford, and she has got a place at Eastbourne College for September. So that was step one. Step two was to find a house down there. Well, I suppose step one was to sell the businesses. So both the kiosk and the pavilion, I managed to sell the kiosk just before lockdown, and the pavilion in July. And then Tess got her place at the school, and then I found a house that I love, and I've actually found a job that I'm loving as well, which is sort of it's almost like the culmination of everything I've ever done in my squiggly old career. All the Lego bricks built up. This is the top of that tower. This is the ultimate job for me. It pulls together all my skills, all my experience, all my networks, all my charity experience. And I've only been doing it since the 1st of April, and at the moment it's part-time and remotely, although I'm on site 2 days a week if I can be. But it's just ridiculous how the stars seem to kind of have aligned. And although anyone that's lost their other half, their soulmate, their right hand, will know it's you wouldn't wish it on anyone, but I suppose being the kind of person I am, this is where I find myself now.
So I think, I'm really, for you to share that with us is really very generous of you on many levels. Not, an easy thing to chat about, but that resilience in terms of, you saying and having that epiphany, like that Eastbourne was really happy place for you and for Rich, and to be able to think about, the future at a point when you're not thinking about the future. I think the people listening to this who are probably in a similar situation or might be facing it, for whom that's really important to hear, and to hear that you're actually, as you say, that almost something you never perhaps envisaged, but is bringing everything together through like what life throws at you, but not something that was planned at all. It's very heartening. But this new role you've got as development director at Eastbourne College, really exciting. But the skills that you bring it, this is, you mentioned your fundraising. We haven't really touched a lot on your fundraising. And I'm really interested just to know the sort of skills that you found really useful in building things like the Soup Fest Festival, but also the fact that people might not know this, but you're Deputy Lieutenant of Bedfordshire, which came about through your charity work. What are those skills that you're bringing into now this role, this new role as Development Director? And what does the role involve?
So the role involves reaching out to the wider community of the school. So that includes the current parents, the current pupils, the past pupils, the past parents, as well as associated businesses and sort of people that live locally that have a connection to the school. So it's being that sort of focal point for all those things. There's an element of fundraising to it as well, and when the next campaign launches for the school, whether that's going to be for scholarships or for capital projects, I'll be heading that up. But ultimately, it's about stewardship. It's about looking after people. And I think that's ultimately what ties everything I've ever done together, is that ability to connect with people and then to want to look after them. And I think that's ultimately what life's all about, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's that connecting, Emma, but it's that helping bit as well. It's a very easy label to say you're a helper, but and as you've described very eloquently, perhaps some of what you've done in terms of the kiosk and pavilion was a good distraction, and maybe that's why you threw yourself into it. But that's not enough, is it? You clearly are somebody who wants to bring people together, but to help bring people together, not for your gain. Even back to that receptionist back in the TV days of, you're not trying to do it callously, you're doing it for genuine intent, and that's broad scope in terms of what you're doing in that role and charities, but also much closer to home in terms of, you've armed your 5 children incredibly well with Lego. When I was a child was, here's a big box, go and try and work it out. Lego for my 13-year-old daughter comes with an instruction plan, and it feels like you've done that for their Lego pieces. You've given them here's the steps that you should also think about as well. So it's a really amazing story on how you've taken that whole squiggly line and turned it into a very coherent structure that's got incredible foundations, if I will.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because the whole Soup Fest thing. So Soup Fest came about because my parents, where they live, they have an annual soup kitchen where the local restaurants make soup, and they all set up a field kitchen in the town square, and people come and buy soup and bread, which has also been donated, and all the money goes to help the homeless. And I'd been to that event a couple of times, and I just thought, Bedford had such a terrible homelessness problem, and I just thought, oh, we could do that in Bedford. And I think there's some filter that I wasn't born with. So I don't have the filter that says, no, you can't do that. That would be impossible. What are you thinking? You're far too busy. I just go ahead and do it. Partly maybe because I remember when I was back in Australia, when I was living there after university and drinking coffee and eating panini on the beach and all those kind of things, there was this attitude amongst the Australians where if somebody said they were going to do something or have a go at something or thinking of starting a business, everyone was just like, oh, great, go for your life. Just have a go for it. And I so clearly remember coming back to the UK, and in a similar situation, a similar conversation, people would be, sucking the air in between their teeth going, oh, are you sure that's a good idea? And it definitely glass half empty. And I've never been like that. I've always been an optimist, and I've always been glass half full, and I've always been a positive person. And I think, I just thought, yep, Soup Fest, we can do it in Bedford. Yep, I'll talk to the mayor, I'll talk to the High Sheriff, I'll talk to the Lord Lieutenant, we'll do it then, we'll do it here, I'll talk to the restaurants. And of course, again, everything leading to everything else. I had all the contacts with all the restaurants in Bedford, we all knew each other. So I said to them, oh, would you make a vat of soup? Yeah, sure, Emma, sure. What flavour do you want? And that's how it all came about. And we've raised a lot of money for the homeless in Bedford, and also helped, I think, raise the profile of the problem. And I'm on the Bedford Homelessness Executive, and we meet regularly and work together. All the different homeless agencies work together, which I don't think happens in a lot of counties. So again, it's just, I don't know, things just happen.
They happen. I love the way you laugh. They just happen. They don't happen because it's that positivity. And I think, somebody once said to me, and I think, in fact, it's even something that one of our previous guests, David, said, surround yourself with positive people, because, the energy, I think, has come through this podcast of you just sort of, well, yes, I should be able to do this, and I can do this. And if you surround yourself with people who think like that, you in turn, I think, can start to think like that. So I think that's great advice for everybody is, be positive, seize the day, and also I think, see the art of the possible as well. But what I'm really left with is this feeling, Emma, that, I'm just really intrigued as to what next, because I have no doubt there's more to come, and I should be watching your move to Eastbourne with real interest.
Well, it's funny because I sort of said to the kids, right, I've sold the businesses, we found a house, we're going to move. I'm just going to do nothing. I'm going to sit in the garden and read books. That's what I want to do. And then this role at Eastbourne came up, and it's just a little bit soon. And I was thinking, no, I can't do it, because I wanted to have this space and this time to stop. And then the more I looked at the job description, I was just thinking, well, it's just perfect. It's got my name all over it. I've got to go for it. And then when I was successful, I was so chuffed. And then they said, oh, we'd like you to start the 1st of April. So I sort of gulped, and now, of course, it's great, and I'll just have to fit that reading in the garden in at weekends or evenings. So there's so much scope with this role. As I said before, it brings together all my different skills, whether that's fundraising or networking. It gives you the opportunity to come up with exciting ideas for events and activities. And what I'm really keen to do as well is to let the leavers, especially this year after the upper 6th year that they've had, let them understand that we are there as a community for them, and it's about what we can do for them, whether that's putting them in touch with mentors or putting them in touch with alumni overseas that they can go and visit, or can help them if they're moving to a new city. There's social events, there's arts events, there's all sorts of possibilities. And the message that I really want to get across to those youngsters is that, they're not on their own once they leave school. We're there for them. The school continues to support them. And we're an incredible resource for them. And I just hope we can keep those connections going, because, as we've discussed already, you just never know where it might lead you. And there I am back at the school that I loved, when I grew up there, and being in the 6th form. And it just feels like coming home. And if I can help those students and benefit them in their squiggly or otherwise careers, then that's just brilliant.
Fantastic stuff there. Thank you so much, Emma. Shane, so much to take away from that. What, as we saw, signposted, a very squiggly career, but a brilliantly inspiring one in terms of dealing with an awful lot of adversity and looking for opportunity. So much to learn, I think.
Yeah, a huge amount. And I think, we overuse the word sometimes inspirational, but not in this case. Emma is truly inspiring and somewhat exhausting, I have to say. I mean, I did make me laugh at her saying people across the street, but more from the sort of you feel slightly shamed that your energy levels aren't quite of those of Emma. So yeah, truly inspiring.
Yeah, I do wonder if she might have a watch that's different to mine, Shane. I've only got 24 hours in a day, but it feels like she's probably got somewhere like 36, 48 on her watch.
I think that's probably true, actually, and very modest with it. I mean, I think it's very interesting. Emma sort of almost glossed over the entrepreneurial side of the founding of the business, selling a business during a pandemic. Oh my goodness, that's not easy. And past Bedfordshire Women of the Year, and her businesses have won awards. So we didn't talk a lot about the business side, but an extremely good businesswoman. Yeah,
absolutely. An incredible mother, wife, all sorts of things that she can be incredibly proud. And I'm sure, and it would have been awfully embarrassing, I imagine, for her to share with her children, but I'm sure her children deep down are very, very proud of what she's done as well. Really, really inspiring stuff. And interesting, Shane, as well, in terms of, taking those learnings, as we talked about, how whatever the role you might be, starting in TV, moving around the world, Australia to Bahrain and back again, how everything you do in one place can really help and lead into whatever you do next, even if it's in an entirely different field or space.
Yes, and I think, both you and I are lucky enough to have had quite a lot of international travel and experience. And I think the fact that Emma saw those opportunities somewhere else, in fact, reflecting on that when she said about, it was normal to have a cafe in a park in Australia that served high quality coffee, but not quite so normal here. It's those ideas sometimes that you can come back from, whether it's on holiday or traveling, or whether it'll happen again, Steve. I don't know what your thoughts are, but actually working abroad and come back and bring it back with you.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, in some ways, we may in 2021 sit here thinking, goodness, the world feels a very big place because we're locked out of so many different parts of the world for various reasons. But I think it's also the other side, Shane, potentially, and technology like the technology we're using right now to record this allows the world to become smaller, if you look at it in that way. So if you've got an appetite to go and explore, then firstly, as you've said, Shane, and as Emma articulated very well, there's a lot of transferables. You know, yes, there are different cultures and different values and different ways of being in different countries, but you can always find something to bring you to a common ground. So you can always be of value to people. But also, you know, what's the opportunity, Shane, for you and I in the UK and anyone else listening in to find roles in other companies overseas that, because of technology, you don't need to physically be there all the time, as we know. And interestingly, we're seeing that in this country as well, not just abroad, that, you know, the London life that many would have wanted over many, many years, of course, will come back. But roles are opening up in organisations that may be the other end of the country to you, that the opportunity's there. Or indeed the competition's there as well, Shane. The challenge of, you know, employees trying to find a way in. Employers listening in should remember, look, your recruitment base is nationwide, if not global, if you're clever about it.
Yeah, and I think that's a really key point, and it's one, in fact, that Emma touched on, is sort of, you know, how do you get into it? It's not through temping necessarily, but possibly the modern equivalent being the fractional working or the contracting, or where you put your hours available. And I think that's one of the things that, you know, mentoring students in terms of saying, well, if you've got some skills, you've learnt some coding, then, you know, join sites like Upwork and Hive and others where you can get some work experience. But it might not be for a company in the UK, it might be for a company somewhere else entirely. But that's still really valuable. And I think reflecting on it also, that fractional work combined with a squiggly career is actually going to be the norm in the future.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's an interesting one. You know, you never know. Squiggly might seem a bit disorganized, but I think it's going with the flow. It's recognizing, as we've heard quite a few times on this series, of looking for opportunity or turning circumstance into opportunity. Don't be boxed. Don't be afraid to think, well, what can I offer to Australia? What can I offer to Bahrain? What can I offer to a charity? Well, how do I run a cafe in a park? You know, it's actually, if you've got the self-belief, and there's a fine line, as we know, Shane, between a confidence and an arrogance, but if you've got that self-belief and you're surrounded by the right kind of people, then yeah, that squiggly line is in a very healthy state of being rather than a state of chaos, for sure.
And who knew that, you know, your A-level in theatre studies would be put to such good use, Steve, in terms of your career of both podcasting, obviously, but also a lot of time spent on stage, but maybe not the thespian sort of stage.
Well, yes, my Malvolio days in Shakespeare or my times of playing the homecoming Pinter may have left me, Shane. But yeah, good use, but definitely use. I'll let the listener judge that. But you're right, it's interesting. And fun enough for me, having spent a good part of the last 15, 16 years teaching and speaking on stage, I'd never really consciously connected that back at that stage of my life with a really strong passion to go into performing arts that for circumstance just didn't happen. That yeah, there's transferables. So, you know, I perform, I suppose, but we all perform, Shane. And I think that's a really interesting to learning without yet again referencing an over-referenced book on these series, that To Sell is Human by Daniel H. Pink. Is, you know, we sell all of the time, we perform, we have to try and convince and cajole others in all aspects of life. So having some learned
you're getting
skill.
A share of royalties on this.
I wish I was. I'm sure he could offer it. But it's always stuck with me. It's a book that I read a number of years ago that actually, don't see yourself as a marketeer. Don't see yourself as a finance person. See yourself as a salesperson or as a performer. You need to be able to, whatever the medium, and back to perhaps what we've just been touching on when it comes to recruitment and new jobs in the new world is, you know, somebody that might be good in an office now needs to be really good over Zoom or whatever the platform is. It's a new medium for us to perform, to sell, to engage people, whatever it is we're doing. It's a really interesting world and a squiggly positive world for sure.
So from one thespian to another, Emma, again, you know, studied English and theatre, obviously very useful skills, despite what some might be saying in career advice today. Carried you both very well through being able to apply
indeed.
it.
Certainly did, Emma. And interestingly, if we went back to my career's advice when I was 14, there was a piece of software that was used by my high school that spat out one day that I should be a window dresser. So I've not quite fulfilled that. That's an actual true story, Shane.
I'm looking forward to this. I can see that this, this could be your something to look forward to.
It'll come once this podcast career leaves us by, Shane. Then look
I
out for the windows of John Lewis.
I think there's something there, actually. I think, given your past sort of theatricality awards events, those who don't know this, but Steve was a man who dressed us all once for an event in lab coats with test tubes. They were clearly right, Steve.
Maybe so, yeah. That's more of a kind of living sculpture. Anyway, enough of me and enough of this for today. Thanks as ever to Shane. Thank you very much to Emma for giving up our time and sharing so much with us. We really appreciate it, and I hope it's inspired you, whatever she said, and maybe you can look at your career. If it's not squiggly enough, don't be afraid to make it more squiggly. That was one of episode 3. There's many, many more episodes if you've not listening to what we've learned. Where have you been? We've missed you, but you'll find us on Spotify, on Apple Music, on Google, on Acast, wherever you get your your podcasts, you'll find us. Should maybe on a commission for Spotify, Shane. They're referencing that twice. Daniel H. Pink and Spotify. But find us on there. And if you want to comment on any of this, you'll find us on wwlpodcast.co.uk, which links through to LinkedIn, our home there, where you can share thoughts on this episode, maybe other episodes, or indeed future episodes. You might be inspired to come and listen or come and chat with us. We'd be very happy to hear from you. We'll be back soon. In the meantime, thanks everyone.